Do you ever feel like your whole life is following a sort of roadmap, like you're taking the path laid out for you, and eventually you realize that you didn't make this map? You didn't choose the road that you're on. You're following the path, but it's a path laid out for you by maybe your parents, maybe your culture, the place you were born or raised. And if you stop to think about it, you don't know where you're going or why you're going there. All of us are following a map. All of us are running on a program. And if you've been following the map blindly, taking the road that's been laid out for you simply because it's what's in front of you and what's obvious in there, you're not alone. That's what most people do. And I know it can feel like that's the only option, but it's possible to start to forge your own path and draw your own map. And all you need is a compass to show you the way. Welcome to Change Made Easy. Changing your habits, routines, and behaviors is hard. We make it easy. I'm Paul Leviton. I help high achievers just like you who feel stuck bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Traditional self help doesn't work. It's either too rigid, too generic, or too overwhelming. My approach is different. I simplify change by making it so easy it can't not happen. Using my easier framework, I'll help you create habits, routines, and behaviors that stick for good, so you can stop struggling and start thriving. It's that easy. I believe that we all desire to be the masters of our own destiny, the ones who draw our own map. And that's why today I'm speaking with Lawrence Yao, the author of The Inner Compass and the creative mind behind one of my favorite blogs called More to That. Lawrence has a unique and special gift for taking big, messy ideas like uncertainty, curiosity, fear, and mastery, and illustrating them literally in ways that stick with you long after you've read or seen them. In today's episode, Lawrence and I dig into why values are your true north and how you can use them to start to rewrite your own map. We discuss Lawrence's fork in the road analogy and what it reveals about uncertainty and suffering. We also talk about the surprising reason chasing status can destroy your creativity and why seeking mastery is the surest way to find a sense of freedom, and potentially one of the simplest but also most impactful rules that I've ever had discussed on this show by a guest. This is a conversation about trust, creativity, and learning to live on your own terms. So come with me as we learn to follow your inner compass and enjoy this conversation with Lawrence Yao. What does it mean to trust yourself?
It's a big question. Big question. Starting off with a big one. I think it fundamentally means that you have the ability to navigate the external world without discounting your inner values. So you have this sense of alignment in that you don't feel like you have to lose your sense of integrity or that you have to sacrifice what you know to be true in order to live and function within the world. I think that is the simplest way to put it. I wrote a book recently called The Inner Compass, which goes into that in much further detail, but that is probably the most distilled version of my answer.
Yeah, I love that. This is how I use the word confidence. Be self confident is the confidence to go through the world, to deal with the ups and downs that come at you, and feel that you are equipped with what's necessary to survive at its basis. But you said there in a way that I don't remember the exact words, but you said in a way that aligns with your values, your inner values. So could you expand on why values are such a important part of this puzzle?
Well, values really are the North Star of your actions. They're the things that anchor what you do and what you feel like you have conviction in. So let's say that a value for you, I mean, it could be anything like consistency, for example, that you value the notion of showing up on a given day at a certain time or what have you, or showing up for your family, for your work. Like if this is something that's really important to you, then lo and behold, tomorrow you wake up and you will be in that position that your value is directing you towards. So it really acts as a compass for your actions. And I think that when you act without having a concrete value stack or a set of values, then you will simply drift according to whatever external expectations expect of you or whatever the norms of a given society are or the culture, for example. So really it's a way to anchor yourself so that you don't just fall victim or prey to whatever the external forces may be that are incentivizing you to go somewhere else.
Okay, very powerful there. I love the idea of a value stack, and I can see the proposed dangers of not living by your values. You become subject to the whims of, as you said, society or just others around you. But are values something that we choose? Like, do I look and say, these are what I want my values to be? Or is this something that is just a part of us already and something that we get the values we get and then we go with it?
I think we don't even recognize that we operate according to values in the early stages of life. And I think that essentially what happens is the things that are most central to who you are actually are the result of happenstance. So you could take, for example, your genes, your parents, your upbringing, your culture. These are all so fundamental to who you are, how you think about the world, how you operate, but none of them were under your control. They were all constructed by other hands. So with that dynamic in place, we essentially enter the world and we navigate it without really knowing what our value system is. We just do what we feel like we've inherited. And as a result, we don't quite know who we are, but then we create the illusion that we do. It's this interesting effect where the more you feel like, oh, there's so much more for me to navigate, the more you kind of are further on this pursuit of self understanding. The more that you're trying to understand, there's more to this puzzle for you to uncover. So I think the essence of values and the recognition of values starts happening when you realize how much of society's conditioning has been layered upon you. When you see that you're operating according to these systems that you had no say over, when you realize that, then you're like, oh, okay, what are my actual values independent of what I've inherited? And the moment you ask that question, then you start seeing what your values may be, or you start questioning the norms and then start saying, all right, underneath all that, what exactly do I operate according to? The moment you become aware of that, that's when your values start to emerge.
Mhm. So good. People listening, just rewind that last little 3 minutes. I akin this to leaving the matrix. You don't know what you don't know. And there's life before this realization and life after this realization. Life before understanding that you are just a piece of programming and that you are the result of every decision that's been made by your parents, the government, the schools that you went to, and all of these different things. And hey, 1 second before we continue. If you're enjoying this episode, if you're learning something from this show, if you're catching yourself saying, man, this is so helpful, this Paul guy is pretty smart. First of all, thank you. But secondly, if that is you, you might have asked, how can I work with Paul? Can he help me create the change I've been looking for? And if you have, you're in luck. Because after 12 years as a coach, both in person and online, for the first time ever, I'm opening up my calendar specifically to talk to you, my podcast listener. Use the link in the show notes to book a completely free coaching session. If you need help with nutrition, fitness, motivation, mindset, basically anything that goes into building your happy, healthy life, then I want to talk to you. Click the link in the show notes and let's chat. I created this podcast to help, and now I want to go deeper. This is the first time I've ever offered anything like this, and I don't know how long it'll last or how long I'll be able to keep doing it, so take advantage while you can. All right, now let's get back to the show. And that's fine. That's guided you up into a certain point. And then there's what happens after you understand that and you're aware of that, and you can start to be the driver of your own destiny, which I think is really cool. But I want to dig into a word that you used just now, which is curiosity. And for those of you listening, I'm holding Lawrence's book right here, The Inner Compass, which I read, but I really advise people to get it because something that Lawrence does, for those of you who don't know who he is he illustrates his writing in a really fun way. I first found out about Lawrence through his blog that I've been reading for years, which I'll link to in the show notes. But the fun part about the blog is there's always fun little drawings that come in with it. And the reason I bring that up right now is because there is a drawing in the early chapters of the book of a fork in the road that brings up the question between curiosity and certainty. So I would love for you to explain what that is all about, and then maybe we can go down that rabbit hole a bit.
Sure. So I introduced this analogy of kind of certainty versus curiosity, our desire for both. And you could think of it as two paths. Now, the beginning of this analogy will sound very obvious, and then there's a wrinkle I add that hopefully produces an insight. So you have this fork in the road that you come across, you're going for a hike and you see it. And the first road is one that is well paved, well trodden, you see the footsteps, proof that this path leads somewhere concrete. The other one is it still has a semblance of a path, but you get the sense that this has not been very traversed and you don't know where it exactly goes, not many footprints, what have you. Now, the obvious question here is okay, which path would you take? And we've heard this before. The wrinkle that I wanted to add here is the element of repetition. So, the question here is what would you do if you came across this path for the first time? What would you do if you came across it for the 10th time? And what would you do if you came across it for the 100th time? Now, what this reveals is that the first time you get there, your fear response is heightened. You're like, oh, I just need to do what feels safe here. So you're going to go on that well trodden path. No question. Okay, 10th time. Now, the question is, why are you even here 10 times? There's something about this path or this fork that seems alluring to you to keep revisiting it. So by the 10th time, you may still take the well trodden path, right? But your your curiosity will be piqued. You'll look at the other path and be like, all right, I wonder what's there. And the fact that it keeps showing up here makes me so curious about what that other path may seem like. Okay, so the path you may take will be the same as the first one, but your thoughts may differ now. By the 100th time, if you're here 100 times, the question you have won't be directed to that kind of hazy path, but you're going to direct it more to yourself. You're going to ask yourself, why can't I freaking get on that path? Like, what is going on here? Why am I just trading away the certainty or the curiosity for that certain path? So you'll start to question like what your impulses are and so forth because you're not following your curiosity. So this shows that after a certain point, as our desire for certainty decreases or that allure of it decreases, then our curiosity for something elevates. There's like this trade off, this inverse correlation between the two. And when you don't pursue your curiosity after a sustained period of time, a lot of suffering tends to emerge. And these questions of, well, why can't you do it? What's holding you back? And the question of what's holding you back tends to be these elements of conditioning and the norms that you've inherited that introduce fear in your life. And I say that fear ultimately is the tension of uncertainty. That if you, every single fear comes down to uncertainty. Like someone that is sick, for example, right? What they fear is that they're not going to get better. Uh, Someone that's scared about money, which we could all relate to. It's not money itself that's causing the fear, but more so whether or not you'll have enough, right? It's not the thing itself, it's the uncertainty that breeds it. So one of my fundamental beliefs is that the more we could embrace uncertainty, or the more that we can be thankful for it, even in a way, the more the curiosity emerges. And that's one of these aha moments I had where it was like, curiosity is actually a form of gratitude for the unknown. That's what it essentially is. If we knew everything, life would suck. Life would be boring. And there would be no capacity to want to learn or anything like that. But because we don't know everything, that's what makes every single pursuit interesting and something worth doing. And curiosity is embracing that fully.
Yeah, wow. Again, so many strings that I want to pull on there. I can't say highly enough for people listening to go get this book and also check out your blog because insights like this are just so abundant in all of your writing, and I really love it. But that was a big aha moment for me too when I first read that. I told you I was reading it in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep one night, and I crushed the whole book in like an hour. And I just saw that drawing and then the analogy. I was like, okay, like what would I do? And for those listening, the reason I think this is so important because this is everything in life. The fork in the road of the familiarity versus curiosity is the person who wants to be an entrepreneur but stays at the safe dead end job that they hate. It's the person who is always thinking about getting in shape, but decides to not because they don't know what to do. But what I want to come back to is how do we shorten that learning curve? Because as you said, the first time we go left, the 10th time we maybe still go left, but we start thinking about going right. By the 100th time, there's no chance of us going left. We only go right. But how do we help people get there without having to repeat the same, I won't say mistakes, but the same pattern hundreds of times?
I mean, the biggest thing is ultimately our relationship with uncertainty. And when you are scared of uncertainty, it fundamentally arises from an inability to trust that you'll figure it out. When you fear uncertainty, implicit in that is saying, I don't have what it takes to face it. And what you're really trying to do is to develop conviction in yourself and to understand what it means to have that kind of confidence. But the layer here to think about is how do you have this confidence in kind of both avenues? One, in terms of understanding yourself better, because I think if you understand yourself better, if you peel away all that conditioning we talked about earlier and get to the core of who you are, then you see yourself for the actual person you are. And that gives you a sense of self confidence. And the other element is how do you then take that and then apply it in the world? And I think this is where a lot of the more I call it woo woo, trust your intuition stuff kind of falls flat because yes, you can trust it and you can just go where it takes you, but how do you know that it's not guiding you off of a cliff? And and how do you know that this is it's pointing to you to where you need to go? And the way that you alleviate that is that you have to keep testing your intuition with the world. You have to ensure that you stress test it in order to earn its reliability. That's the only way for intuition to become reliable is to keep conducting experiments to say, all right, this is who I really am, and then to take that and apply it to the world, gain the feedback, and see what comes back. So it's this continuous dynamic between the self and the world. And the more you do that, the more you feel like you see uncertainty as this kind of ally, because uncertainty is the very thing that allows you to iterate through these loops. So I really feel that following your intuition, building that comes from a place of having self confidence. Yes, that's one thing, but then continuously testing that confidence with the world and ensuring that you have harmony between the two.
So good. I love the idea of stress testing your intuition. Something I talk a lot about, my listeners will know, is being a scientist and looking at everything as an experiment. We often, as humans, either consciously or subconsciously, feel like everything is so final. If I fail, that's bad. If this doesn't go well, the world is over. And nothing is final except for the one thing that is. And when that happens, you don't have to worry about anything else. But a scientist will look at things like a hypothesis and then an experiment and then a result. And often the result doesn't go the way they hypothesize. But a scientist doesn't look at that as a bad thing. They look at it as, to use your word, a curious thing and a reason to get more curious and investigate more. So I love that way of looking at things because I think that it takes away a lot of the pressure to get things right, which is something that we all have. And as we're looking at things as a stress test, we're inherently getting better. The more reps that you put in, the more that you're able to improve over time with no anything that you're working on, whatever your thing is. Another bunch of illustrations that you use in the book are the compasses. The book is the inner compass, and you use several different life compasses throughout the book. And one of the compasses that was very interesting to me was the compass of creativity, and in that you juxtaposed mastery with being the polar opposite of status. And I thought that was very interesting because I don't put those two words together in my brain. So I was curious if you could expand on specifically the entire dynamic, but what mastery is, what status is, and how those two interrelate.
Yeah, so I guess to give a little bit of context behind what you've articulated there. So I think the inner compass is basically the metaphor that we can use when it comes to understanding the relationship between what we have conviction over, which is your true north, and then anything that takes you away from it, which I refer to as conditioning. And that anything that takes you away from your conviction is usually from some sort of expectation that's been layered on from the outside. So when it comes to the domain of creativity, I have mastery as the true north, the thing that you have conviction over, and then status is the form of conditioning that pulls you away. And the reason why I delineate those two things is that I feel that in the domain of creativity and really many other domains, but I chose creativity specifically here to focus on, is that we tend to build things or do things or follow certain endeavors based upon the rewards that it can accrue, the external rewards, and whether it's fame, wealth, status, those generally are the three things. Ultimately comes down to money and status. That's all the external elements go toward that. And we use that as the barometer to determine our success as creatives. And what I argue is that if you continue to use those as your lighthouses, the things for you to pursue, then it's only a matter of time before you continuously use your own status or your own place in society to determine your self worth. And it's never going to be enough. There's always more status to chase. And as a result, you'll never be content with yourself. Now, the flip side to that is mastery. So, what is mastery? I think mastery is the quest to improve yourself as an end in itself. So, comparisons are not made with other people, but only with prior versions of yourself. So you see how here the only comparison point is just you. You're not really looking to the outside to determine your own place in society or how far along in your craft may be. So one way that you could kind of actualize this or see this in action is like whenever you take a look at something that you've done years ago versus what you're doing now and you kind of like cringe a little bit. I'm sure Paul, like you listen to your very first podcast, you'll be like, I can't even listen to this for more than like 2 minutes. And that's actually a sign of mastery. It's a sign that you have a firmer control of your craft and that you have a certain taste profile that you've developed over time that signifies to you what feels better and that you're making progress, right? And I think that mastery is the very thing that will allow us to do any creative endeavor for the long run. Any chase of status is ultimately a short-term play and will likely lead to either you burning out or you not wanting to do this anymore. But if mastery is what you're after, and the only thing that you're trying to do is to improve as an end in itself, then that ensures that you're going to continue to do this. And I think one short anecdote that I'll share here is with my personal relationship with writing, and with more to that, my blog is that when I first started this thing, I wanted to test whether or not I can do this purely from a mastery standpoint, meaning that do I really want to spend a lot of time doing this, even if the external reward was at zero? I mean, when you're starting out, everything's at zero. So, what I did was, for the first couple of posts, each one took me about 90 to 100 hours to do. And not a lot of people are going to spend 90 to 100 hours on a single blog post. But it was my way of testing whether or not I was intrinsically motivated enough to do this. And the answer was yeah, I enjoy doing that. I enjoy doing these drawings, writing my ideas, thinking about them. Like, it was something that I found motivating itself. And having that desire for mastery, it just also makes your stuff better. So I feel like a byproduct of mastery is status, even if you're not pursuing status. And in my case, like the first post I published was called "Travel is No Cure for the Mind," and that did pretty well. But like there was this element of I'm intrinsically motivated. I want to carry this through, and beginning that way kind of set the foundation for that.
Yeah, the irony, maybe not irony, depending on how you look at it, is that chasing the thing is exactly the thing that makes you not receive it. And when you stop chasing, or to use your words, holding on to the expectation so tightly, you allow yourself the space to be consistent, and that will then force you to receive the thing in the long run. And for those listening, I'm talking about, again, anything. Fitness is I use as an example all the time because of my background. The people who fail are the people who go, I just have to lose this much weight in this much time. I just have to look a certain way by the summer. And it's like you're holding so tightly to this expectation. If things don't play out exactly the way you hoped it would, then you go, well, this isn't working. I quit. Versus the person who comes in and just goes, I'm 30. I want to live to 100. I have 70 more years. I just got to do something. I don't really care if I lose 20 pounds or not, as long as I start to feel better. Lo and behold, they're in it. And 2 years later, they've lost 20 pounds. They feel the best that they've ever felt. It's by not holding on to that thing so tightly. The other side of that is that status game that you were talking about. You're chasing money, you're chasing status, you're chasing a specific thing, yeah, whatever that thing is. But as you're saying that, my immediate thought is those things are just a proxy for certainty. Money is certainty because it means that I will be okay. Status is certainty. So everything comes back around to these things that have been programmed into us from before we even knew to think. So I just like pointing this out because it shows how tricky all of this can be. I say to my clients all the time, just knowing this is not enough. It's not like, oh, okay, thank you, Lawrence. I understand this now. I will never fall for this stuff again. It's insidious and it sneaks in ways that we don't realize. But the first step, the only chance you have of ever potentially getting out from under it is having that awareness, as you've mentioned a few times. But now, assuming we get there, like, okay, I get it. I've labeled my true north. I know what my values are. I've started to build this life that I can be happy about or be proud of. And we kind of break out of that rat race. That's what everyone wants to do, is be on your own path. If I don't live by society's expectations, if I don't do just because that's what I'm supposed to do, what is the next step? Where do we go from here? What do I do with my time? What do I do with my energy and my attention if I'm not just following the path that's laid out for me?
I think some people have this misconception that if you're doing your own thing and you're on your own path and you've kind of freed yourself from the clutches of conditioning, then basically you are fully autonomous and that you're doing your own thing and you're kind of throwing up a middle finger to everyone saying, "Hey, I'm just doing me, man. This is just me now." And I think that is such a big illusion. And what you'll realize if you even try that for an experiment is just how quickly we are all intertwined and that you are completely dependent upon other humans for your mere survival, not just biologically, but psychologically too. Like I like to say that life is a single player game, but meaning is derived on multiplayer mode. You need to be in communion with others. You need to interact with others in order to even feel a sense of purpose and meaning in your life. So, okay, let's say that however you define autonomy or freedom, you have been able to achieve that, whether it's financially, whether it's with fitness or what have you. Now, the question is, okay, well, what next? I think the first thing is like, don't become a jerk. Don't become a jerk, and especially in the sense of basically thinking that you are above society, because no one is above society, and neither would you want to be. I think that is a trap of like people who want to transcend society or so forth. It's like, no, we are all part of this together. And that's one thing that I also say too, is that relationship is a mirror. The way you view others will reflect the way you view yourself. So you want to always approach anything that you do with a strong dosage of humility, because that humility is also what's going to nourish your interactions, your relationships, your capacity to learn. And as you mentioned, like you feeling like you have struck out on your own and you feel great, it is like this attachment to certainty, right? You're like, oh, I'm doing my own thing now. I feel good. I'm certain that I got here. But any certainty of that nature, you get attached to it. I was just thinking about your example with the fitness folks, where let's say someone did say, okay, yeah, I want to lose 30 pounds by June, and they do lose it and they do get there. Imagine like the angst though that comes with after getting there. You're like, well, now they got here. I gotta hold on to this, man. Like I can't let this go. If I gain 5 more pounds, I'm gonna think I failed. So you're just holding on to that certainty for dear life, even after you've achieved what you thought you wanted. So I think similarly, if you achieve freedom, however you want to define that, you want to make sure that you don't hold on to it and make that your identity. Because if you do, then you isolate yourself and you get really attached to whatever this identity you've built is. Instead, there's always this notion of knowing when to let go and also realizing that, hey, this is just the start of another path, whatever it may be. Now, if you have financial freedom, for example, what you have is more so the capacity to explore any of your interests, right? But whatever that interest may be, there's going to be a human being that is associated with it. If your interest is podcasting, for example, let's say you're like, I just want to be financially free so I could podcast all the time. Well, you're going to have people to talk to. You're going to have things to talk about, things of that nature. So there's always relationship involved, which is why I focus on it so much in the book as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a good point about, like you said, even having the goal and then getting it leads to its own set of problems. And this is, you said, the classic example of someone who loses the weight and now they have to keep it off. And this is why we hear statistics like 80, 90% of people who diet then eventually gain the weight back. Or another common one is money. I'll be happy when I have blank amount of money. But everyone knows that you get that amount of money and then it just kicks the can down the road because lifestyle creep and all of these different things. And now we're spending more and it costs more to live. And now $100,000 is bottom middle class now, and now I need $500,000 to be happy. You're always chasing the dragon if you set out with these expectations in mind. And I love, it can be so complex about this stuff, but we can also be so simple. And I love what you said, don't be a jerk. That's like very simple. I wrote that down. Rule number one, don't be a jerk. These things don't have to be that complicated. And I think that we can philosophize on for years on end about all these different things, but I also value simplicity because I think that as humans, we want to be able to give back, and everything else is kind of just taking away from that. We want to, I do think at our core, we are good, and most people want to help or want to serve in some way or want to do something that is meaningful for themselves or for the world at large. And you talk about this in the term of creativity being different than just art or making things, in the sense that I think it's used regularly. And I thought that was a very interesting point. So could you explain the difference between creativity and art and why you're so bullish on creativity specifically?
I think that creativity is a birthright. I think it's something that we all have access to. The issue is that we do not think that we are creative because we feel like we lack the talent to do what is socially acceptable or socially lauded. So anyone that says I'm not a creative person, they what do they say? Oh, I don't know how to paint. I don't know how to write. I don't know how to do this or that. I just spend my time doing non-creative things. But that fundamentally is to mistake creativity for art. I think there are two different things. Now, what makes something creativity then? And I really tie it with this single word, which is your agency. So, what is an activity that is it fully in alignment with your interests and also that you set the intention behind it? And this is actually a great example of us being here together to chat. Let's say you just gave me a phone call and we just caught up on our days or whatever. You wouldn't really interpret that as a creative act. You would just think it's just, oh, I'm just talking to Lawrence. But you put two mics in front of our faces and record this conversation, and next thing you know you're like, oh, I kind of want to prepare for it. I want to make sure that we have this dance of dialogue and so forth. It feels creative. And why? It's because you have set the intention of being here and you want to do this and it's fully in alignment with what you're interested in. And I think that we all have something like that. I think the disconnect is that we have been conditioned by society to not view these kinds of things as creative acts. And there's many examples of this. Like I was even thinking about someone that cleans their room or organizes stuff. Like that is not seen as a creative act. But then what do interior designers do? Like they're just moving stuff around and making things look cool. but there's an intention behind what they're doing, which is why people view that as a creative act. And the truth is, you can do this for anything as long as you view it as such and that you show up for it in that way. And the reason why I tie creativity in with self understanding and the ability to know yourself is that it reflects your capabilities in the most clear and purest way. Because if you are doing this because you feel that you are intrinsically motivated or interested in it, and you actually do something about it, you apply some kinetic force behind it, then that propels you to the person you're capable of becoming. And really, creativity is the engine for that. It's one of the few things that actually tie in ideas or your interests versus expression and action. And it links those two together. And which is why it's tempting to just be like, oh, okay, this pursuit of knowing yourself, trusting yourself is a reflective act. So you just kind of sit there and then you isolate yourself and so forth, and you're sedentary. But the reality is, to know yourself requires a lot of kinetic movement. You have to actually express and be involved. And I think that having a sense of agency over your actions and thus making it a creative act is what really, really helps you to understand who you truly are and gives you the confidence to embrace what you find in the process.
All right. I feel like this is coming full circle a bit because now we're back to the knowledge of self and understanding what we want and what our values are, and then aligning that. I love the intention. As you said, intention changes everything. the, the cleaning your room is a perfect example. It's a thing that you do, or it can be art. It can be a creative act. I've watched TikToks of people cleaning their room and like a before and after. I'm like, whoa, I wish I could do that. But I could do that. But I didn't have the intention because it's not the thing that I am passionate about. It's not the thing that lights me up. So we talked about values, but when it comes to creativity, if anything can be creative, what do I do if I haven't been creative in the past, in the sense that I've been the person who has thought about creativity in the standard sense? It's making art, it's writing, it's painting. I hear you. I want to be creative and I want to make creativity an act. I want to take that potential energy inside of me and create kinetic energy. But how do I know what my thing is?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think most of us feel like there might not be anything. Like, I think most people, when you when you kind of say, "Hey, yeah, you're a creative person," they're like, "Okay, let's say I buy into that. How would I actually feel that way, man?" Like, that's the number one question. And I think to that person, the very first thing that I usually go back to is, what did you feel when you were younger? What were some of the activities that you did when you were younger? And the reason I ask that is because when you're younger, you kind of do things on their own accord. They're kind of divorced from the incentives and the rewards that could come from becoming quote unquote good at something. And it was interesting because even in my case, I thought about it and I actually wrote a lot when I was younger. I wrote and then I read. So, but let's say, for example, there was nothing there that you could find yourself, oh, I created at this young age. I can't think of it. Another thing is like, well, what were you consuming when you were younger as well? What are the things that you enjoy doing, interfacing with, and so forth? Like for me, I love to read as well. Maybe for another person, they love to watch movies. Because if they watch movies, let's say, for example, and that has piqued their interest when they were younger, then there's a chance that the creative side to that can also light them up. Then what if you were to actually give that a shot and just to see how it's like? Take your phone out, record some things. These are all very low risk experiments that you can do. But what they do is that they make you wonder what you feel about it when you do it. It's something outside of the rote mechanics of life. I feel that sadly, when people go into adulthood, they just do things because they feel like they have to. And they do things because, well, I have to make money. That's basically it. And sure, I understand the importance of that. I'm not downplaying the importance of money, but I feel that if you're able to supplement that with this small oasis of time where you actually do something for its own accord, how small it may be, but that you're dedicating some time to doing it, then I think that it will introduce a new dimension to your life that you didn't previously see was there. It takes some reflection. I talk about journaling a lot in the book. It takes a lot of this kind of practice to see what that may be. But thinking about the lens of childhood and your upbringing is a good place to start.
Yeah, I think it's such an important thing to think about for anyone listening, of just doing a thing for that thing's sake. And this kind of goes back to mastery, as you spoke about, where I feel like now, and I'm guilty of this like no other, it's everything is for another thing. Or I can't just be doing something, so I have to be doing something else. So it's like I'm riding my bike somewhere to get somewhere, but I might as well listen to a podcast and learn something while I'm doing it. Or I'm doing my emails in the morning, but I'm walking on the treadmill because I can't waste any time. And the thought of going to the gym, not to achieve a result, but just because my body needs to express itself, or to sing, not for anyone there, but because that's what I do, is something that I don't think adults do. And because of that, we lose that ability, and we lose that ability to express ourselves. And we also learn the ability to then learn new things, because that's also how we try things. And this is something that, again, as a coach and a trainer, I've seen so many times where I would bring something up to someone to try something, and they're like, I haven't never done something like that. And it's like, yeah, of course you haven't, because you haven't done anything since you were in high school, meaning anything new. We graduate from college and we work because we need to not starve to death. And that's really the only thing that's been on our minds. So the reason I'm saying this for those listening is because it doesn't have to be for something. I think that especially now in the 21st century, in 2025, it's like, well, could that be a side hustle? Could that be a thing? Could I monetize this? It's like, yeah, maybe you could. And that's cool too, to, as you have done, Lawrence, write a blog or a book that can then support you. And like that becomes a vehicle for financial independence. It's like amazing. Who wouldn't want that? But I also do think there's value in saying, I'm going to write not with the expectation that it ever takes me anywhere. Specifically not. Specifically with the expectation of that maybe no one will ever read this. Or I'm going to make that video on my phone, not to hope it goes viral on YouTube, but literally for the sake of creativity. And so it's just interesting, as you were thinking about that, that kind of goes right back to your mastery versus status comparison, because now I, as I'm talking through it, see those as two opposite sides of the coin. So I'm appreciative of you putting these out there.
Yeah, that's a great distinction, just like you elaborating on it. And I feel like what has made my writing practice, for example, sustainable is that not only do I write to publish, which is to share my ideas, but I also write for myself every day. So every day I have a journaling practice where I know that no one's going to read it. Not even I'm going to read it, frankly speaking. Like, unless I want to just be bored and be like, dude, this makes no sense. I'm not going to read it. So that's clearly an example where I'm just doing it for its own sake and not to express my ideas. But it really is just like this intrinsically driven activity that makes me feel like I understand myself a little bit better. And it's not like every single entry gives me this aha moment. A lot of time it's just gibberish. But I think it's the very fact that I showed up to do it and I'm doing it for its own sake. Like, whatever that may be, I think it's very important to have an activity that is that for you. And it's like you were saying, it's uncomfortable to do things with an uncertain result or that there is nothing there because like you're saying, everything's supposed to be a means to some end. Even money itself is just a means to an end. Like something has to convert to something else. But there is like this nice letting go that you feel when you actually have something you do for its own sake. And we all know this. Let's say, for example, if you become parents. So I'm a father, and there's nothing that's like, oh, I play with my daughter and then I get this. You're just doing it for its own sake. And that's actually what makes that bond so special. It's so clearly embodied there. And I think in a somewhat of a parallel, you can have that sentiment, maybe not to the same level of acuity, but you could have that sentiment imported into some activity where you just do for its own sake, and that's actually what makes it so special and what makes you want to keep doing it, and also gives you a better understanding of who you are, and as a result too.
Yeah, and just as you're saying, I'm thinking expanding on that, you can literally just flip it and do the inverse and realize that if you have to pay someone to do something, it's inherently less special. If you said, "I only play with my daughter when I get paid to do it," you'd be like, "What the fuck? Like, what sense does that even make?" Even if it's the same time spent, both of them are spending an hour with your child, but one is doing just for the love of the game, so to speak, and the other is doing because you get paid. One zaps the feeling out of it. And I think that that's something that's worth exploring in ourselves, where it's like, why am I doing this? And does not having a reason make it even more impactful? And then conversely, as we already discussed, ironically, somehow makes it more impactful because you do it more and you build consistency. And again, people listening know I have my framework that I teach, which is called Easier. So it's EISIER, and it's an acronym for how do we build habits and make change more sustainable. And the first E stands for enthusiasm, and it's just do things that you want to do. So much of life is trying to force a square peg into a round hole. I go to the gym, but I hate going to the gym. It's like, I don't know, do something else. I want to do this, but I really want to do this. And then the R in easier stands for repeatable. So can you do this thing over and over and over? So it's the same thing you're saying with mastery. Show up consistently with no expectation of what's going to come on the other end. And that breeds that creative act. We get all of these things, all of these benefits, and we also get to know ourselves better because it's not through the first time asking that you find out. It's through going back to the fork in the road, the second, the 10th, the 100th time, going back to your journaling practice. I'm sure the first day that you journaled, as you said, maybe not the biggest aha, but over 365 days a year, over 10 years, a broken clock is right twice a day. Eventually, there's going to be something that gets you somewhere. So I love everything that we're doing with the various compasses. I'm so appreciative that you put all of this stuff together. Again, I'm going to highlight all of everything in the book. I'm going to put in the show notes where people can go buy it. Also, your blog, more to that. But I want to finish with these same two questions that I ask every guest, Lawrence. And the first is, what is the change that you want to see in the world?
Wow. I would love for people to treat each other for who they are and not for what they have to offer. That's one change. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. And then lastly, if you had one action step that listeners could take right now today, as soon as they take their headphones out, as soon as this episode ends, to start making any change they're trying to make in their life just a little bit easier, what action would it be?
The most practical thing I could think of right now, which I do think is so powerful, is it's going to sound a little trite, but it is a journaling practice. But I want to make one distinction here. A journal is not a diary. I think a lot of people think that a journal doesn't really do anything for their lives because they treat it as a diary. A diary is like the what's of life. You're just chronicling what you did, what you felt, so forth. A journal is more about asking the why. Like, why did you do it? Why did you feel it? And you want to try to keep a journal entry as much as possible. So, if there was an action step here, it would be to be like, okay, what's a source of tension in your life right now? And instead of just writing what that is, ask yourself, why do you have that tension? Why do you think it's there? And what you'll find is that there is some sort of narrative that is driven from the outside that is driving this tension. And I think you'll see that very clearly in like less than 5 minutes. So I think that's something that you can do to identify whatever narrative might be driving that fear, which will help you then reframe it to make some change.
Before you go, I want to talk to you. Literally. For the first time ever in over 12 years as a coach and 4 years doing this podcast, I'm opening up my schedule to help listeners like you for free. I'm offering a free coaching session to you as a thank you for supporting this show. I help people create their healthy habits and happy lives and create positive change around their health, wealth, and relationships. Whatever you're working on, mind, body, and soul, we can cover it all. If you're struggling, I want to help you build a plan to get through it and past it. So go into the show notes and click the link that says book a free call today. I don't know how long I'll be able to keep doing this, and my schedule will fill up. So if you want to take advantage, make it happen ASAP.